Hello, friends. Happy Wednesday. Happy midweek. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy time zone wherever you are. And I hope the weather is treating you okay wherever you are as well. And spring has sprung. We're getting closer to summer, I feel like. And in the BC area, we're starting to feel like it's actually spring. So hopefully the weather will warm up even more and we'll have more sunny days. Anytime there's sort of a stretch of rainy days, it's kind of like, I want the sun to come back. So that's where we're at. And hopefully you've had a relaxing start to the week so far and that the rest of your week goes okay. Nothing too intense. And hopefully you have had some time or will have some time this week to play with your stationery, play with your pens, take out your inks, do some fun painting or swatching or just exploring them in general. That's what we're going to do today, is doing some painting and just generally exploring a few fountain pen inks, ink samples that I have. And just kind of relaxing and enjoying some time with fountain pen inks. So welcome in, everyone. Let me know how you are doing. Let me know how your week has been. If you've been really enjoying stationery or something in general, let us know in the chat. And if you have any questions, also throw that in. On Monday, I did a little bit of drawing and just practice drawing some flowers. These are some hybrid lilies that we have in our backyard. We got some flower plants from the local nursery and have been really enjoying the vibrant, cheerful flowers and the energy they kind of bring to, your yard or wherever you kind of have them. And so, I drew these on a card and I'm going to gift it to my husband. It's our anniversary next week. And so I thought it'd be kind of nice to capture flowers that we actually have. That was really, really fun. But today I'm going to, instead of drawing them with markers and stationery tools, I'm going to use everything fountain pen related. So I'm going to use fountain pen inks. I'm also going to use a fountain pen to draw some details. This is one of my newest or latest acquisitions. It's a Kaweco Sport, the glow in the dark. And I went to the Kaweco DIY event at a local retailer over the weekend. And got to put this together. It was really fun. It was just, kind of a little bit of fun to put together a fountain pen and then get to walk away with it. So that was really fun. I inked it up. So we're going to have a little bit of, I'm going to try it out and just kind of play around with it. So if you've wanted to draw with a fountain pen, stick around because that's what we're going to do, and we're going to have some fun doing it. So let's just... Okay, so today, and if you missed my Monday stream, check out the VOD, or if you want to watch it on YouTube, I also put my replays on YouTube. So check that out. And let's get started with some ink painting. So if you haven't seen me do this before, I am using a Midori or MD TN inserts or Traveler's Notebook insert. This fits into a Traveler's Notebook cover, and it is Midori cream paper. So it is not the usual sort of white inserts that you can get, but I've been really enjoying the creaminess of it with fountain pen inks. And MD cream is one of my favorites. So I've been really, having fun with painting on it and really exploring this kind of paper and the way that inks show up on cream paper, and also the way that the properties can show up on here. So that's been really, really fun. So the inks that I'm going to paint with today are some samples I've had for a little bit. So there's one that I'm trying to use up. It is Lennon Toolbar Bubblegum. And if you can tell by the swatch, it's actually a really light, sort of muted, soft ink. And it is not one of those inks that I like to put in my fountain pen because it's just not as legible as I like it to be. So I've been really enjoying painting with it instead, right? So instead of tossing it, I've been using it to add to my ink paintings, and it's been really, really fun, and I'm almost done. So the second ink I have is Sailor and Plus, and it's just a pink. And then the third is Sailor Shikori Yozakura, and it is a really, really pretty sort of pink purple or mauve color. And then I have Birmingham Pen Co. Weeping Willow, and this is sort of, it's a green, it's a greenish ink, sort of olive, but probably more onto the greenish, green yellowish side. So that I'm going to use for leaves. And if you can tell, we're kind of going with a pink vibe today. Pink, mauve, you know, cream or peach color. And we're just going to keep it soft, light, gentle. And then we're going to draw on top with this. And the reason why I wanted to go with sort of a pink vibe is because I've inked up my Kaweco with a brown ink. And so I wanted to try drawing with the fountain pen on top of ink that I've already painted. And I thought the brown, pink, peach palette would be really, really nice. So that's what we're going to do. And in terms of brushes, I'm using a round brush, and I'm also using a filbert brush. And mostly, I think I'll kind of interchange them, but mostly I use the round brush for painting. So I'm gonna do that. So I'm going to start with the lighter color, being this bubblegum, Lennon Toolbar bubblegum. And first I'll do a swatch actually. So you can see it's pretty light. And then also on this cream paper, actually, it looks a little bit darker, which is really nice. And then also, I think the sample may be a little bit more saturated than what it was previously, just because of water evaporating a little bit. But it is pretty light, so then I'm going to add a little bit of the Sailor Shikori Yozakura. I'm just going to add it in. Okay, and then the third ink is Sailor and Plus, and it's a really nice pink. It's a very bright bubblegum pink, so add a little bit here. It's very, very pretty and bright. Let's do a little here. And then I'm going to add this Yozakura to it. Okay. Okay, and then for the green, which is Weeping Willow from Birmingham Penco. Let's swatch it here. It's a very interesting green, because you can see a lot of that yellow coming through, but it's not a dark green. So I wouldn't really, I don't know, it's not really like the typical olive colors I tend to use, but it's still in that olive family probably, in that, you know, you can kind of get that yellowish brown warmth from it. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but there's some construction happening and it's very distracting, but I'm just gonna kind of ignore it. So hopefully it's not annoying. Maybe I'll put a little bit of green in here. Just to have that color. Yeah. Okay. It's very nice, I think. Add a little bit of, actually what I am going to do is I'm going to re-swatch this green here, use this. To do a little bit more. Okay. All right, so I think what I'll add is a little bit more of the Yozakura, but I'll add it to some of the tips here. So I'm gonna let that dry, and while that's drying, I am also going to paint in my watercolor sketchbook. So it's watercolor paper, and I like this for painting with inks because you can use a lot more ink, but you can also desaturate it a little bit and add water. You can also do a lot more mixing and blending if you want to. Because the paper will, of course, be able to handle that kind of ink volume and water volume. So while this dries, we'll play around on the watercolor paper. Spicy Hellcat, how's it going? Is the week over yet? You know what? It is not. I am here to tell you we're only midway through this week. But I hope you're hanging in there, and I hope you're getting through it okay. I think it's just one of those weeks. Okay, so let me just clean off these paintbrushes a little bit. So on this one, I am going to start with the bright pink. I think I might actually need a little bit more on my palette. So the palette I'm using, by the way, because you can't see it because there's not enough space on my desk, but I'll try and move it here, is from Studio Aquamarina, which is our friend Marina, and I got it from her at the SF Stationery Fest. And it's handmade by her, and she does these sort of porcelain piece of works, really beautiful pieces and palettes and other kinds of really beautiful pieces. So the bright pink I'm using is Sailor N Plus. And just this bubblegum pink color, which is really pretty. Reminds me of like cherry blossoms and summer flower colors in general, which is so nice. And so I'm gonna use that first. Let's swatch it down here. So pretty. So okay. I am going to use some of this lighter peach pink, which is Lennon Toolbar Bubblegum. Not bubblegum, bubble tea. I'm thinking bubblegum because it's the bright pink. I was like, does it remind me of bubblegum or kind of like cotton candy? But this color, this sort of peach color, beige, tan, does actually look like bubble tea. Not bubblegum, so very nice. I'm gonna put a little bit here as well. So while you can add light to dark, just know that it's not going to be as visible or vibrant as opposed to adding dark to light. And so, you know, even if you layer in a light color, what ends up happening is it sort of blends into your darker color, which also could be kind of pretty, right? Like, it sort of adds a layer here that makes it look a little bit more dynamic, but just know that it's not gonna stand out on its own. Spicy, spicy Hellcat. I'm gonna call you Spicy now. I still blame you for me buying those art supplies and Lisa. You know what? That is all Lisa's fault. I don't take any blame. Sorry, not sorry. Suki, how's it going? You're seeing brown. Yeah, your eyes are not deceiving you. It is not a brown though. It is this very light peach tan color called Lennon Toolbar Bubble Tea. And then I'm also using Sailor and Plus pink and Sailor Shikori Yozakura, which is a very, very pretty color. And then for the green, I'm using Weeping Willow from Birmingham Pen Co. And it has a very, very interesting green for sure. Weeping Willow. So you can see as it's sort of drying in the palette, that green with sort of a reddish brown yellow tint to it. And so it warms it up a little bit. And takes some of that green down a little bit, tones it down just a little bit. So I'll add a little bit of this mauve color. I'm also going to add a little bit more of this pink here. Like that. Yeah, I chose this palette because I want to draw on top of them with my latest acquisition, the Kaweco Sport, and I inked it up with a brown ink. So that's why I wanted to go with sort of a pink brown vibe, and just kind of play around with it. So we'll see what it looks like. I haven't tried it yet. But the idea is to kind of have fun with it and see where it goes. I'm gonna add a little bit more of this green. Spicy Hellcat, thanks for joining the club. I appreciate you, friend. What Kaweco did you get? It is the Kaweco Sport Glow in the Dark. So Kaweco Glow, and then I added a chrome clip to it, which I thought worked really, really well with the sort of silver on top of the glow. This was part of the Kaweco DIY event that they've been doing, and a local retailer was hosting it. So thought I'd go and check it out. And I do like that Kaweco. It's very pretty. Sort of like I think someone on Instagram commented and was like, it looks like jade, like a jade body. I was like, you know what, it does, because it's not so like bright fluorescent green for a glow in the dark pen. So I thought that was kind of a nice touch. Okay, I think I'm done. I'm just gonna leave this now. And let's see how the other one is faring. It should be dry, I think. We'll check it out. The only thing with green inks is sometimes they turn your water into fluorescent, it's like they're radioactive or something, but just don't drink the ink water. I have one coming to me at my next pen meet. That's awesome. Dube's got you one? That's so cool. Broad nib. It is juicy. And I love broad nibs. The broader, the better, in most cases. And and when I did a quick writing sample with this nib, I was like, wow, it is a broad. It is very juicy. So even if you are into, like, if you do use broad nibs, just be aware that it is very broad. It's nice, but yeah, it's definitely a broad nib. In that kind of case, like, if I'm thinking about, you know, Kaweco or Lamy or Pelican or something like that, European nibs, I can get away with medium with that kind of pen, because even for medium, it'll be a juicy medium, and so it would lean closer to broad, and you know, I'm good with that. So I would have been happy with a medium or a broad, but I'm glad I got a broad. So let's see how we're doing here. There's a little bit of wetness still. I did put down quite a bit of ink, actually, because I'm using broader brushes, where sometimes or most of the time, I think I use finer brushes that don't put down a lot of ink, just because, especially if it's on, you know, fountain pen friendly paper, I don't want to put so much down that it just takes forever to dry, or that it kind of sits on top, and then it just, you know, makes these water spots or indents in the paper. So I tend to use finer brushes, but that's okay. You can really see where the ink pools highlight, you know, the shading of the inks, even with the pink. It's very cool. Okay, I think I can write the names of the inks at least while we're waiting for it to dry. You went with F nib? Yeah. Are you usually an F nib person? Do you usually go with fines? Your handwriting has a lot of curves, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I have a Pelikan 205. And I'm good. I love Pelikans. I don't think I need any more, but I like how juicy the Pelikan nib is too. Yeah, I think I have that one in an F nib, but it writes closer to a medium. So, you know, I like it. I'm used to probably more of the, you know, pilots and sailors and if I get abroad expecting that it's going to write more like a, you know, medium, closer to a medium than abroad probably. But I also like kind of balancing that out with Western nibs and, you know, so playing around with broader nibs, playing around with finer nibs, and having a little bit of both is kind of fun, I think. As long as you kind of know what you're using it for and what to expect. Sometimes I think it's like, you know, if you expect it to write a certain line width and then it turns out to be way bigger or way juicier than you expected, sometimes it's kind of like, oh, it just takes a little adjustment. Yeah. You like F broads and italics, yeah. That's cool. Some inks look better in F nib. Yeah, it's often hard to tell unless you try it out, for sure. I think me personally, I like using broader nibs just because I like more of the ink to show on the paper. And also because my eyesight is not the best. So I've just gotten used to, my writing has gotten bigger and I've gotten used to seeing bigger handwriting. And so, yeah, I prefer the broader nibs. But that being said, if I'm using a fountain pen for note taking or in my planner or, you know, in a notebook where I just want to jot something down, close the book and move on, then I tend to lean towards a fine or medium. In most cases, medium. And in very rare cases, my ultra extra fine Platinum 3776, which I haven't, I've retired it for a little bit just because I've had it inked up for so long that it was just becoming, you know, one of those pens where you're like, you just take it for granted. And so I've retired it for a little bit. And when I start missing it again, I'll take it out and start playing around with it again. Okay, so Lennon toolbar. Bubble tea. Then we have Sailor, Shikori, Yozakura, and Sailor and Plus, pink. And then Birmingham Pen Co. Weeping Willow. Hi, Derek. How's it going? Bring on EF and needle points. Yes. Yeah, needle points are, there's something really nice about them. Very lovely. And if I do use a needle point, I know that I'm not going to be able to see, all of the ink glory. But I do it for the point, for, the writing, for how I'm going to write, and also the line width. Like, I know it's going to be super, super needly, and I think that's part of the enjoyment. Is, if you're using a gel pen like 0.38 or something like that, like it's one of those, it's a throwback for me. If I'm using needlepoint, it's definitely because I want to get that sort of really, really, really delicate, detailed line. You have a super crisp EF cursive italic. That sounds really cool. Yeah, that sounds really cool. That's fun. That's surprising though how much some of them will show good shading or sheen. It is, right? Like, it is dependent on the ink for sure. Is this ginger chicken? Or is it golden wheat? One of your regulars, I'm sure. Ginger chicken, yeah. that gingery brown, orange. It's so nice. That's such a nice color. Okay, let's see. Is it dry yet? Mostly. I think there's a little bit of wetness, which I'm just gonna blot. I'm just gonna blot it away. So let's just do that. Tiny, tiny bit. All right. So what I wanted to do was usually what I do is to add the detail on top. I usually use my Kakimori stainless steel dip nib and pigment ink, so Kakimori pigment ink. But what I wanted to try out and just have fun with today is using my new Kaweco Sport Glow in all its glow. And again, the nib is broad, and I've inked it up with Robert Oster and TheCoffeeMonsterzCo Coffee Monster. So, let's see. I'll just swatch it here. No, I'll just start drawing with it and then I'll swatch it there because I don't want to smear it. So, but I decided to go with a brown ink because I think it was Tsuki in my on Monday's stream was like, you should do brown. And I was like, you know what? I think I do want to do brown. And then I thought a great way of sort of testing the nib as well is by drawing with it. So that's why I'm using it. I did do a writing sample with it, and it's like it was very juicy in the writing sample. So I knew that drawing with it would be good because if it puts down a lot of ink while you're writing, that means it has consistent flow, and also you'll be able to see it if you're sketching or doodling with it. And so, I mean, you could do it with a finer nib as well, but if I'm drawing on top of an ink painting, I know that it's already kind of competing with the ink that's already on the paper. And so if I'm drawing with an ink, it has to stand out in terms of line width or the color, or, you know, in some way it has to stand on its own. So I think the Kaweco broad nib. Definitely does that. And that's also why I chose this palette, which is more pink, mauve, you know, peach colors, and a little bit of olive, which goes really well with brown. So you can see those lines in there. It doesn't take away from the ink that's on the paper, and I kind of like that. I do like drawing with black ink, and it just looks good when there's like comparing and contrasting happening. But drawing with brown ink is also kind of nice because it doesn't look aggressive or too intense, right? Especially on cream paper, like everything is sort of warm and it sort of blends in really nicely. Works really well in terms of paper, ink, palette, colors. So you kind of like the idea of needlepoint. Have you ever tried a needlepoint, Suki? Yeah, you love ginger chicken in an F nib. Ginger chicken is a very bold ink, a very bold color. So yeah, I definitely would love that in a finer nib as well. It sort of stands on its own. You don't need to put too much down to recognize the ink or to, you know, to appreciate the color that ginger chicken is. So let's So yeah, it puts down a pretty broad line. I'm just going to put broad here actually. And you can tell even with on the drawing, the line is pretty, it's nice and juicy, so. And I actually used, I just used a converter. In my Lilliput, I'm using the foldable converter from Kaweco, which actually lets you ink up a tiny bit more, because you can tell like their converters, the Kaweco converters are really small, as are their cartridges for the Sport, just because it's a pocket pen size, right? But with a foldable converter, you can add just a little bit more ink and then fold the back of it down, which is very useful, especially if you use your pen a lot for writing or drawing. So, all right, so let's let that sit for a little bit. And then we have this, which is still drying. I'm just gonna put it's very smooth to write with. even on watercolor paper, which is textured, doesn't seem to have too much of a problem there. So that's good. Do you feel like the converter makes them write slightly wetter? Interesting. Maybe. I don't know. I definitely know the old style converter does for me. I'm still unsure if the new folding back style does or not. That's interesting. Let me grab my Lilliput for a second. So in my Lilliput copper, this is the foldable converter. So what you can do is, if it's pulled all the way up when you're filling it with ink, you can then fold this in, and so that means you can add this extra little bit in. But what I did actually was I filled the converter using a syringe, and then I pushed down so the ink would fill the feed and into the nib to get it to write, which is totally fine. But this nib is a medium, and it actually writes pretty juicy too. So for medium, it's like puts down a really nice line. So let me show you in this. Hobonichi notebook. So this is the Kaweco Lilliput. So medium. And I have it inked up with Waterman Serenity Blue. So it is just a straight up standard blue. And this one is the broad nib. So, and they're both using converters. So I guess we can't really compare converter to cartridge, but we can compare broad versus medium. And you can see with writing with both of them, it's just smooth. Like the ink flow is just consistent too. So this is Robert Oster and TCMC Coffee Monster. So there is a difference between broad and medium. But like for a medium, right? That's still pretty broad-ish. And no problems with ink flow. So, I mean, it could be something with, the cartridge just letting that ink just be consistent and flow through. And they're two different ink brands. So they are fine. They're behaving really, really well. So who knows? It's very interesting though. I've inked up this Lilliput with different inks before, and have never had an issue with it. And it's the same with my Kawecos, like just in general, my Kawecos. I don't use cartridge in them. In my experience with, any ink that I've put in them so far anyways, they've behaved really, really well. And they're they're just consistent in terms of their ink flow. So yeah, try cartridge. Yeah. Oh, you have all the metal sports inked and the converter ones write thicker lines, all with EF. Interesting. Huh. I've never come across that kind of comparison before. But that is interesting. Okay. So let's try. It might be a little bit of a different experience drawing on watercolor paper than like regular fountain pen friendly paper. Just because of texture and also how the paper kind of responds to ink on it. So sometimes I find that it feathers a little bit in terms of just spreading a little bit. So you have a little bit of ink spread just because it's sitting on top of ink that's kind of wet the paper or primed the paper in a way. And sometimes if you're reactivating it a little bit by adding ink on top, now you're kind of reactivating the water on there, and it tends to kind of end up flowing a little bit more. And I find the same thing with pigment ink as well. When I'm drawing on watercolor paper with pigment ink, sometimes it sort of reactivates what's underneath and then it ends up spreading. It looks like a wider line than what you end up drawing, but it's just knowing what to expect and just kind of going with it, I think. Doesn't feel too bad drawing on watercolor paper, actually. So I like the brown ink on top of the painting because it doesn't look as obvious as a black ink does. So, for example, something like this where there's lighter ink colors, and then on top I have the pigment black. It looks different when it's brown ink. So yeah, even like this. Right? So it's very cool. I like both of them for different reasons, and just that it looks different as well. Sometimes you get used to doing things a certain way and drawing things on top of others a certain way. And it's kind of nice to switch it up a little bit. So, anyways. And then let's compare on MD cream paper versus stark white watercolor paper. Similar vibes, like similar sort of tone and shade. But you see a lot of more ink pooling, and so you get a lot more shading on fountain pen friendly paper versus watercolor paper because it absorbs it really, really well. And it looks a little bit more smooth or seamless. when you're blending colors on watercolor paper. Just move things here. And so if you are drawing on top of ink, you know, if you're adding ink on paper and then you want to draw on top of it, it's kind of nice to explore the ink colors that you do use, right? So you can use a standard black to add details to your drawing, or you can use a color that fits into that palette and works really well with those colors that you're using. It may not stand out as much, but maybe that's the point. You sort of get these colors that work really, really well together. Happy 1 year, geez. 1 year mod anniversary. Modiversary. Yay. How's it going? Looks more natural. Yeah. Mixed media paper would be similar. And it also depends on, like, this is mixed media paper, right? And it's pretty stark white. And it's just a little bit thicker, right? It handles inks pretty well. I would say sort of in between. Mixed media paper for me comes in between fountain pen friendly paper and watercolor paper in terms of painting and the versatility of it for using water, you know, layering colors, things like that. And so if you have a fountain pen friendly notebook, yes, you can paint in it, right? Especially if you're using MD notebooks or paper, because it is slightly thicker, slightly sturdier than TRP. And you'll get this sort of water buckling. You'll get the buckling of the paper where the water is kind of, you know, it's sitting on the paper. So of course it's going to change the smoothness or straightness of your paper. And it's also going to give you this crinkly sound, which is very satisfying. But mixed media will handle water a lot better. You won't have a lot of this buckling happening. But the ultimate for painting or adding lots of colors, lots of layering, even if you're kind of using markers, right? If you're layering marker color on top of each other, that means you're going over the same spot on your paper over and over again. So what would happen with like copy paper or cheaper paper is that you would start to pretty much take off the fibers of the paper, right? Like it would start to soak through and start to rip or just, you know, damage the paper itself. And so what you want is thicker, sturdier paper for if you're working on it, you know, a little bit more than just adding color and leaving it. And then if you're including water in any aspect, then you definitely want paper that can handle that. So that's why watercolor paper is, you know, the ultimate kind of paper to use for any kind of ink painting or regular watercolor painting as well. Just because it will give you this sort of smooth look. It will handle it a lot better. You won't have the paper buckling underneath, right? Like it stays to form, and that's fine. And then also depending on the type of fountain pen friendly paper you have to keep in mind show through, bleed through, ghosting. So in that case, you know, I only tend to use one side of the paper and then I just kind of move on because I don't want to add to the weight of, you know, having ink sitting on paper, and then also risking that it shows through onto the other side. That's a personal preference, I think. But yeah, you know, trying to find the right paper for the stationary tools that you're using, right? Depending on what the medium is that you're using. I think paper plays a huge role in that. So testing different types of paper, finding out what actually works for you, what you prefer, whether it's texture or color, or how it sort of reacts to your medium. I think that's what's important. So one thing that might work for one person might not work for what you want to use it for. So I think that's kind of important to keep in mind, is what medium are you using and what's important to you in terms of your experience and what you want it to look like in the end. So all things to consider. But marker paper, there's also, you know, if you like thinness of paper, like TRP or something like that, you can also think about coated paper, like marker paper, which is great for markers, obviously, but also great for light watercoloring too. So it's similar to painting on fountain pen friendly paper or ink friendly paper, in that you get, you know, the paper is a little bit thinner, and it can handle a little bit of water and a little bit of, you know, playing around on it. Yeah. I'm good too, geez. Trying to get through this week. Trying to get through, you know, yeah. Trying to get through weeks. That's a pad you bought? Okay, yeah. Mixed media is great for mixed media, right? Like it's sort of a versatile in-between paper. And you can sort of manage it in that it's not so thick that you can't, like, you know, fold it into a card or, you know, whatever sort of use case you have for it. So mixed media is definitely a great exploration paper, that you can use different mediums on and figure out what you like. But it's also one of those types of paper that you get at, you know, an art store or something like that. It's not going to be a planner type of paper or even a notebook type of paper, because it's thick, it's heavy, and you're more likely to use it for art than you would for writing on. And so I think in that way it differs from more of a stationary notebook or something like that you would just pick up and use for writing, but also for art. So that's very cool. I do like it. I feel like the brown ink stands out a lot more on the MD paper than it does on watercolor paper. So here it sort of blends in as well. And especially on the green, it's harder to see it, but I don't think for me it matters too much. I think as long as I can kind of see details in the piece, I'm happy with that. That's very cool. Well, we still have a little bit of time, so maybe I'll do another painting. Let me see what I have. I have paper. Let's move this. So I also have my, actually, I don't know, what would you prefer to see me paint on? Canopus or MD Cotton? Let me know, because I can do either. I've been using the Canopus Note from Yamamoto Papers more for marker art. So using markers to draw and add color, and using a fine liner to add detail. And I've been using the MD Cotton notebook for colored pencils and fine liner as well. So pretty much doing the same kind of drawings that I do in my Canopus note, but using colored pencils because cotton paper is really, really good with graphite and pencils in general. Because it has that slight texture to it, even though it's a soft paper, it has a bit of texture. Back to work. Have a good one, Spicy Hellcat. Spicy Hellcat. Do MD since the PA notebook will be MD? Yeah. You love Canopus favor, Spicy Hellcat? I love Canopus, but MD would be a good preview of the other. Yeah, except that it won't be cotton paper for the Pen Addict paper. So Pen Addict will be, I think he said graph. So that will be similar to this. Because this one is an MD cream insert, but it's blank. But we can do it in cotton. And see how that performs. And I think so far, I think actually Brad did test on cotton paper with inks and swatches and stuff like that. And I think it looked really good. So let's see what painting on it would look like. Actually, just gonna put that in there. And what I'm actually kind of curious about is how absorbent the cotton paper would be with inks in terms of when you're painting with it. If it's like fountain pen friendly paper, or if it's like watercolor paper. And let's see. All right. So I have my inks. I'll swatch them. Okay, let's see. Let's start with bright pink. That is very bright. Okay, then we have, maybe I'll use this one. We'll use the bubble tea. from Lennon Tubar. Then we have Yozakura, which I'm just gonna add here. So right away I can see the paper buckling under the water, and it's just, I think from just being soft. Just gonna put that under there. And I am putting quite a bit of ink down as well. So if it was less of water, less of ink, then I think I would have a little bit more time to kind of absorb. Yeah, so it's just kind of mixing in and spreading a lot, depending on how much water is already there. So let's add the green into. All right. So yeah, that's pretty wet. It's very nice in terms of in terms of being soft enough so that when you're painting on top of it, similar to when you're writing on top of it, probably it feels pretty soft. It feels pretty smooth with, you know, just a little bit of a texture. But it does kind of, you know, when you're putting a lot of ink on it, you can see how it's pooling in these areas, and that is going to take a while to dry. But the rest of it looks pretty good in terms of how the inks are blending together too. So you'll see a lot of ink spreading here, for example, right? So adding a second color on top of a first, and using that to kind of spread out the ink a little bit. It's kind of nice as well. How's it going, Queen of Washi? Howdy. How's your week been so far? So yeah, that's gonna sit on here for a little bit. You see the ink just kind of moving around on here. If you are using this type of paper or any kind of paper where it takes a little bit of time to dry, or you're kind of seeing that ink spreading and you don't want it to spread throughout the whole thing, or, you know, take up too much space, what you could do is just use a hairdryer or a craft heat tool and kind of dry it out, and then you can move on to the next step. If you're layering colors, it makes it a lot easier instead of, you know, waiting for ink or paint to dry. The easier way is to kind of heat it up a little bit and help that process of drying, especially if you don't have like a sunny, hot day, and you do kind of want to move through different layers, or, you know, the longer you let it just sit and naturally dry, what you're going to end up seeing is that water and ink continuing to move. Even if it's, you know, just a little bit, it will, because it's now touched this green part, and it will just continue to kind of saturate and kind of flow with that. So it's fine, because I'm just kind of having fun painting with it. But if you are working on a piece and you want it to look a specific way, or you want colors to be, you know, in their specific areas, you don't want it to distribute throughout, then that's something to keep in mind. And also, you know, the alternative is don't put a lot of ink down. Don't put a lot of ink or paint down. You know, if you're just watching, then it's fine, right? You can kind of let it dry or dry it. But if you are looking to paint, or you're doing a specific piece of art on this type of paper, then just keep that in mind. I put this down, but there is no bleed through. It does sort of soak through the paper a little bit, and I don't want to turn it over just yet. But what it just might be is similar to MD paper, where it just kind of dries like this, and it feels a little stiff. So it might, I don't know if it would feel that stiff on here, maybe a little bit, but that's where you get the ASMR, the crinkliness of it, right? It stiffens the paper. Heat guns are fun, yes. They also just they also accelerate the process, which is, you know, useful and helpful if you are, you know, just spending a certain amount of time on this, and you don't want to wait around for something to dry, right? They have craft guns which are not as severe as heat guns. Yeah, I'm sure they do. You can also use a blowtorch. I'm just kidding. Always be safe. Only use what you feel comfortable with and have used before or feel safe using. And if you do, just want it to naturally dry, I tend to just leave it because I actually like the look of, ink just naturally drying the way that it wants to dry. And so I don't really like messing around with it. Even using a blotter paper, because that will pull up some of the ink. But, it is what it is. So if you don't have time to wait for something, you can always kind of accelerate that process a little bit. And blotter paper is another option, right? You can tell from the other side. You can use it definitely to kind of just pick up a little bit of the ink, especially if you put down a lot and you have a lot sitting there. Yeah, definitely if you have kids around. I have a heat tool that I don't take out too often, and I also have it put somewhere stashed away where my kids can't find it, because you don't want to you don't want to find them playing around with that for sure. And I also have personally used heat tools where, if your finger is in the way, it does get really hot. So, it's even as a grown up, have grown up fun. Like, just be careful. Use those heat tools if you want, but just be careful. Which paper do I enjoy art the most to use? Watercolor paper, so watercolor sketchbooks, because I can throw, especially with painting, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to use watercolor paper when you're painting with inks or with watercolor paints, because you can put down a whole lot of it, and it still comes out really nice and smooth. But that being said, I like using fountain pen friendly paper and notebooks because I have so many of them, and also because I like to interchange between writing and drawing in them and using them for art. And so that's kind of fun. I've only recently started using MD paper or notebooks for art, like as a sketchbook, because I do prefer writing in them. But that being said, cream paper is really nice for writing and for art. It's just that you have to be, if you're not using white paper, just be aware of the color might skew a little bit differently on cream paper or off-white even. But yeah. So that's why using watercolor paper is really nice, because you still get that white paper. So, your colors will look vibrant and true to what they're meant to look like, I guess. But also, the paper lets you kind of play around with layering and saturation. So using a lot more, adding water, that kind of thing. But other types of paper I tend to kind of use for art if they're too spongy. I think fountain pen use, or someone said in another stream how they found like Cosmo Air Light type of paper to be spongy, and I thought that's a great way of describing it, because to me it feels shiny. To me it feels like really coated. And that kind of paper, I don't like writing on it because it's almost like it's squeaky or something. And I'd rather use that kind of paper for painting or art, where I'm using a brush and I'm just putting down color and inks and paints and stuff. I would rather not write on that kind of paper. So if I have those types of notebooks or paper available, I tend to use them more for swatching or painting, and kind of enjoying it that way. So it does kind of depend on paper, but if I could choose from any paper to do art or use it as a sketchbook, I would definitely use watercolor paper first. And then I would go with a number of different fountain pen friendly papers. And like we were talking about with Spicy Hellcat, mixed media paper is a great in between, where you can use pretty much any kind of medium. as long as, you kind of test it and it performs fine on the paper. But I think that's kind of the purpose of mixed media, is that you can layer different mediums on there and it would still behave really, really well. Versus, paper that's meant to be written on, and then we kind of end up using it for art, which is fine, but, we have to be aware of that. So this is still drying, but you can tell where, the water is really sitting. The paper is starting to buckle underneath as well. So it's not the same as, drawing or writing on it with pencils and using pens and stuff like that, versus using a brush and ink. So it does take a little bit longer to dry. But it still looks nice, still looks good. And this is MD cotton paper, so. Bristol, yeah, Bristol is good too. Bristol tends to be, if you do like thickness of like a mixed media paper, Bristol is a good one as well. Because it's also on the thicker side, can handle a lot more. It's great for like greeting cards, or if you're creating your own postcard or something like that. It's great for that as well. But there's definitely options if you're looking for art specific paper, versus a notebook that has paper where you can use inks and write in, but you can also do, your sketches and art in it. So if you are dedicating a notebook or sketchbook to art, there are different options in terms of paper that you can look into for sure. This is almost dry. That's doing really well. So this is what I did earlier, using MD cream TN insert. So this would be similar to the MD notebook that the Pen Addict is releasing soon, hopefully very soon. But if you're thinking about using it for, if you're using lots of ink on it or something like that, handles it really, really well. No bleed through, very minimal show through, if any. But if you are using it for art, or you're going to do swatches or something like that in it, then just know it sort of has this, it sort of buckles, and you'll get that crinkly, very satisfying sound out of it as well. But in terms of properties of inks, great, right? Like all the colors look vibrant and I think true to what they should look like. And you can also get secondary properties coming through as well. And then just in comparison, watercolor paper and the way that it handles fountain pen inks really, really well. And again, colors mixing and blending together really well, and showing their properties off as well. So that's really fun. I missed a leaf on here. So what I used to draw the details on my pieces is this Kaweco Sport. It's a glow in the dark. And the ink is Robert Oster and the Coffee Monsters Co. called Coffee Monster. So it's a really nice brown ink. Very, very cool. So those two. And now you can see some of the, you can see some shading happening here. Maybe a tiny little bit of sheen too. On the green, which is Birmingham Pen Co. Weeping Willow. It's a very interesting green, brown, olive green, something in between there. So we have Sailor and Plus pink. We have Lennon Toolbar Bubble Tea. Sailor Shikori Yozakura. And Birmingham Pen Co. Weeping Willow. It's really nice. So on cotton paper, fountain pens will also, you'll feel a little bit of feedback because of that soft texture, which I really, really like when I use pencil on this type of paper. It feels really nice, but it's still smooth enough that, you know, you don't really feel, you don't feel it catching or anything like that on a nib. So I think it's mostly dry. So that's pretty much it. So very vibrant. Colors are nice and bold. So I like how the different inks are kind of blending in and mixing. So they're creating their own layers and they look a lot more dynamic. It's a great way of mixing colors and kind of having fun with them and letting them sort of play around with different shades as well. And then the green is nice where, you know, depending on where the ink started to pool, you can see where, you know, you're getting a little bit of shading there. And then in other parts where it just kind of blended and looks softer. And we have a little bit of the colors coming through, which I don't mind that. Even if it doesn't look realistic, right? That's part of fun of having, or that's part of the, you know, the fun of painting an abstract or painting in a way that it's just, like, it's not meant to look super real, right? We're not drawing from a reference or anything like that. So have some fun with it. Let the ink do whatever it wants to do. And now that it's pretty much dry, I think this is kind of taking its sweet little time, which is fine. But, you know, you can see on the other side, there's no bleed through. A little bit of show through, maybe just ghosting, I mean, where you see a little bit of that ink ghosting on this side. So I mean, I only like to use one side of the paper for art, just because I don't want it to show or ghost on the page that I actually have the art on. So I wouldn't do anything on this side anyways, which, you know, is fine. But it does kind of show you how much cotton paper can absorb in terms of the amount of ink that you put on there. So obviously for writing with a fountain pen, it's going to be totally fine. But if you're thinking about using a dip pen or a glass dip pen, or you know, swatching with a brush or any kind of tool, and also if you want to do a little bit of painting or something like that. So it's always worth testing your paper first, and then seeing not only does it bleed through or ghost on the paper, what does it do to the paper itself, right? So it changes its form a little bit. So obviously if you're using it in a notebook, know that your papers are going to be sort of crinkly and not in its regular form in your notebook. So that's just part of having a sketchbook or a book that you use for art. And that's totally fine. But I know that about me. So, you know, it's your personal preference as well. If you're going to use a notebook for writing and you want it to look a certain way, if you also use it for art or exploring inks, then just know that. So, but I like cotton paper a lot. I think I've been using this for drawing with colored pencils. So I think it's great for pencils, and even adding color in it. Fine liners, you know, are really, really great on here. But inks are really good too. So, you know, I don't really have a problem with it in terms of using ink. But again, you know, if you're painting or swatching, just be aware that it might take a little longer to dry. So if you're, you know, if you don't have the time to wait, or for whatever reason, you know, you could use a blotter paper or use a heat tool of some sort in a safe way. Hi, Needle Girl. How's it going? Thank you. I have now created 3 different painted pieces. So we were busy today. I normally only do 2. But I had time, so I figured why not use another notebook. So take your pick. You let me know which paper you like the painting on. And which one you kind of like the look of? So we have MD cotton paper, which MD cotton paper is it's a very gentle off-white. So it's not stark white at all. It's just very nicely off-white if you're not into cream, but you don't mind something not being true white. Cotton paper is a good one. Then we have watercolor paper, stark white, you know, but textured. And then we have, actually, let me move this way and then do that. No, that doesn't work either because it's going to fall off. Oh well, just going to have to do that. So cotton paper, watercolor paper, and then MD cream paper. Trying to put everything into view. There we go. That's pretty good. So cream, definitely off-white, slightly off-white, and white. So, you know, you can kind of see difference in the brightness and vibrancy of inks, right? You have watercolor paper, which is going to be your most vibrant. It is going to be able to show those properties off really, really well because it handles it really, really well. Then you have, you know, cream paper, which I prefer to white sometimes because it makes inks and paints look a little warmer. And so if you are using sort of bright or dark colors, it tends to warm it up a little bit with a cream background. But you know, it still handles inks really, really well. It is MD after all. And so, you know, you're not going to have much problem with being able to see your inks and play with them and explore them. And then you have slightly off-white cotton paper, which, you know, absorbs inks. Takes a little bit longer to dry, maybe, depending on how much ink you're putting down. But also, you know, depending on the colors, it could sort of soften them a little bit because cotton paper is softer. But yeah, I mean, they all kind of look similar, but I think the differences are probably a more personal preference based difference, including the experience of using each paper to paint or draw or write on. So similar to us having, you know, our personal likes and dislikes in terms of writing paper, that can kind of play into it as well. Marsh Mouse. The MD cotton is your favorite look. Yeah, it looks really, really nice. The dark pink ink. So we have Lennon Toolbar Bubble Tea is a lighter pink. Then we have the mauve one, which is Sailor Shikori Yozakura. And the bright pink is Sailor Plus Pink. So this one is Yozakura. This one is Sailor Plus. And then you have Bubble Tea as sort of the lighter version that kind of brings it all together a little bit. Yeah, I will always prefer watercolor paper and the way that inks look on it. But I come from watercolor painting, you know, doing that, loving the look of it in general. So for a more casual, you know, using fountain pen friendly paper for painting or swatching, I do like the cotton paper look. the cream looks really, really good. I used to use a Tomoe River paper insert, or, regular TN size notebook that had Tomoe River paper, and that's a white paper, right? So I kind of got used to seeing inks and painting with inks on white paper, and being able to do it on MD paper has been really, really nice, because it's just, like I said, it sort of has a more warmer tone to it. Inks look a little gentler on there, a little softer. If you have darker inks, it mutes it down a little bit, just because when you're painting with it, you're putting down a lot of ink, and you sort of have bigger areas that you're covering with ink. So I find that it's just a little bit easier to look at on cream paper. Even with darker inks, it still handles it really nicely. And you still get all the properties coming through, sheen, shimmer, whatever. So yeah, it's still a really, really nice paper to be using it for painting and for putting down a lot of inks. So, and drawing with a fountain pen and kind of adding details on top as well. Great using on all papers. Watercolor paper, you just have to be aware that it's textured paper, right? It's thick textured paper, but not in the way that it would damage your nib. So it's not like your nib's going to get caught in the fibers or anything like that, especially because it's cold press. It's fine. It's good quality paper, but it will feel a little bit differently when you're using fountain pen on top of it. And then also, if your ink is a little bit wet or damp, what might end up happening is when you're drawing on top of it with a fountain pen or, any tool that uses fountain pen ink, what you might end up seeing is the ink starts to sort of spread out a little bit, just because it's using that dampness to help with the flow. So that's something to keep in mind. Whereas with fountain pen friendly paper, what ends up happening is the ink dries fully, given time. And so if you're then drawing on top with fountain pen ink, especially in a fountain pen, then it's totally fine. Like you shouldn't see that ink start to spread or the line width start to change and it gets wider or anything like that. So that's just talking from experience of using this type of paper, which, may or may not make a difference to you, but it's just something I wanted to point out. Always things to kind of take into account, I think. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep an eye out for Brad, the pen addict. He's gonna stream, I think, in about 5 minutes. So let me know if you do see him pop up, and I'll set up the raid and we can continue. We can kind of continue hanging out over there. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, paper thoughts, ink thoughts, any thoughts, let me know. Throw it into chat. We can chat for a little bit before we head over. Let me know what you're up to. What's the rest of your day? What's the rest of your week looking like? In terms of streams, I will be streaming next Monday. So my regular schedule tends to be Monday and Wednesday. The next couple of weeks are going to be a little hit and miss here and there. So if you don't follow me on Instagram at From Corolla, do, because that's where I'll post updates on my weekly streams. So, and reminders too, because sometimes, we don't get notifications and twitches and things happen. So I always try and remind or put up Instagram stories, and also just my status update on Instagram. If I am streaming, it'll be on there. And But next week, I think I'll only be able to stream on the Monday, and most likely doing some drawing. So we'll do some flower drawing practice, which I like to do on Mondays because it's kind of a gentle start to the week. Gets me at least into a creative mode. Trying to set up the week for taking out stationery supplies, using all my fun pens and inks and all that kind of stuff, which sometimes we tend to, in our regular routines, tend to dismiss in terms of like, I don't have time for this. I'm just going to use a regular pen, or I'm just going to use my regular notebook and just do the things I need to do. But it's a good reminder to set aside at least, a little bit of time if you can, 15 minutes, if not 5 minutes, to just kind of play around a little bit. And in that way, you keep practicing, which is always important. But also you can put a little bit of time aside to explore. So maybe it's a new notebook. Maybe it's doing something new in the same notebook you use all the time. So if you use it for taking notes, draw something in it, doodle in it, or try a different type of paper for something that you didn't think you could do in there. Take out your ink samples, right? Paint with them, use them up. I'm done this one, by the way. Lennon Toolbar Bubble Tea, we're done. Use up your samples, use them in creative ways, have fun with them, right? Explore them, get to know different mediums, papers, tools if you have them. If you have a new fountain pen, draw with it. I know we all do writing samples, but do a drawing sample, do a doodle, and explore it that way, or draw on top of your swatch or something like that, and kind of have fun with it too. What else? If you missed part of the stream, or you want to catch my streams, remember you can always check out the VOD. And if you're looking for older content, or you prefer watching it on YouTube, I do put all my replays onto YouTube, and they kind of live there forever. So you can check out my previous streams, draw along with me, paint along with me. It's kind of fun having replays and videos on in the background while you're doing stuff. I always kind of like to have something on while I'm being creative too, because then it doesn't feel like it's just me doing it. It kind of feels like we're kind of hanging out and doing things together. So that's always fun. So I do see that Brad is on. So I'll throw it over there in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for being here. I hope you had fun watching me paint on, different kinds of paper and in my various sketchbooks and notebooks. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you next Monday, same time, same place. And of course in other streams, and generally online somewhere. But yeah, thanks for being part of the community. And if you're watching the replay, remember, I always appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here in some way. Even if you're lurking, or you can only chat, or you can only watch, it's all good. We're just kind of hanging out, doing art. And I think that's the important part of it, is, doing the thing. So make time for the thing, make time for art. Take out your supplies and stationery, and remember to play with it, explore it, have fun with it, and find your joy using them.